I'm happy to hear that a majority of the crowd is relatively familiar with EAS. So there's a couple ways that we could take this presentation. I think it's always helpful to start with just like why EAS exists. You can understand how to use it, especially as we think about like public goods infrastructure more broadly, and just like how you can apply EAS pretty much immediately in any of the tools that you're building at different degrees. So happy to do that. And then we can jump into some of the tools that we have, like Explorers, and then definitely make sure we've got like 5 minutes or so for anyone just to jump up and ask questions about EAS, or to like present like what you're working on. And if you need any help or have ideas of like what types of attestations could be made, happy to do some kind of live brainstorming together to do that. So I'm Bryce. I'm one of the co-founders of EAS. My role is really to help builders every day implement EAS, think about how attestations can be useful. And our current focus right now is really around improving the developer experience. So anything that helps you go from this idea stage to actually making an attestation is what we're really focused on. So to do that, we're really trying to work on improving the docs. Right now, like we launch our docs, we're like, sweet, we've got docs. And then like everyone's like, hey, your docs are good. But they've kind of like creeped over time to be a little bit like squirrely. And so we're trying to like rethink about like the best path to help people within Ethereum, and also like engineers that are exploring like attestations more broadly understand what Ethereum is, and also like how to make attestations related to Ethereum. So we're trying to simplify our docs to be a bit more generalized and more simple for all types of builders. And then we're also exploring a concept around like a developer studio, which is really thinking about like better ways we can make the Explorer experience. So if you have any opinions on like, hey, I wish this type of view, existed to help me manage my attestations, would love to hear that type of feedback. But EAS, really the purpose of it is we're really passionate about decentralization and like decentralized systems, and how we can, really fulfill the vision of Ethereum when it first launched, which was, let's create land registries, voting systems, DAOs, right? All these like, decentralized organizations. Let's create, under-collateralized lending protocols, prediction markets, all these things. And here we are 10 years later, and we really haven't been able to achieve all of them. We've made significant progress, but it made us really think like, if we haven't been able to like have like, decentralized voting like at scale, or land registries, what was missing? And it's an identity protocol. You need identity. If you have a land, like a land registry, you need a government to attest to say that the land is real, right? Or else like it's hard to confirm that this parcel of land is real. You need some sort of authority to say this land is real. And so we realized like, okay, we started looking around all the identity protocols, and there's so many of them, and it creates a lot of confusion as a dev to figure out like, all right, if I need to like confirm who made this type of statement, then I need to know like who that person is. And it was really complex. And so we realized like, well, maybe everyone's building a layer too high. Maybe this idea of identity is a bit too abstract. And so we thought, well, what actually is your identity? Like philosophically, when you're born, you didn't have an identity, and then you did. So like, what happened? And so you could say like, I'm going to pick on Paul here, but when Paul was born, right, his parents said like, hey, this is my son, Paul, right? They attested to your name. Then the doctor attested to your date of birth. Then the government attests to your passport. Then you go to school and the teacher attests to your grades. Then you start attesting to other things, like things that you like, brands that you support. And so all these little micro interactions in life are just people saying things about things. They're just attesting things. We just haven't had like an elegant way to do that online and digitally. And so we realized if you want to solve like really complex things and abstract things like identity, you can't just create an identity protocol. You have to first start with a very simple primitive and Lego block for making an attestation, right? And then letting people derive like if that attestation is relevant or important to them. And so EAS is a very simple protocol for just structuring and signing data, which is making an attestation. So it's one entity saying that this data is valid. It doesn't confirm that the data is like true, right? That's up for interpretation. It just confirms that the data is valid and was signed at this time. And you can make attestations on-chain or off-chain. So I'm going to jump into a screen share just so you can kind of see it. But as I do that, feel free to interrupt me at any point as we're going through some of this stuff. I'm just on base. For EAS, we created kind of like the Etherscan for attestations. I'm on base, but we're across like, I think around 12 to 13 different chains right now. Most adoption is really focused around the superchain ecosystem. That's where we've seen the most like builder interest. There's been experiments like on Polygon and Arbitrum and stuff, and some pretty cool ones, but really it seems like the core focus has been around the superchain. And the Explorer just allows you to inspect like what type of schemas exist and then what types of attestations have been made with those schemas. And so if I click on the schema list, you can see attestations kind of coming in pretty regularly. If we look at the schemas, the biggest user right now is Coinbase on Base, believe it or not. But they've been attesting to verified accounts and verified countries and verified Coinbase One users. And they do this so users can actually get an attestation signed by Coinbase that their account or this wallet address has been verified. If that attestation exists, protocols like Morpho and others have built like, perks and benefits and even like, access rights into specific pools. The benefit is that this is all very programmatic. Attestations are very structured and they're very easy to be read by smart contracts and verified by smart contracts. So this attestation, I'm just going to kind of like dive into it. Every attestation gets its own unique identifier, this hash up here. You get an on-chain timestamp if it's made on-chain, but attestations can also be made off-chain, so you can store them in a database, in IPFS, wherever you want, locally. You can define an expiration date, and you can also kind of validate the life cycle of the attestation by its revocation status. So is it revoked? No. Could it be revoked? Yes. We can see that this attestation is using a schema called verified account. EAS doesn't control what types of schemas people create and like the best ways to create schemas. We just allow you to register the type of data, and then you can make attestations referencing that schema. So this is verifications.coinbase.eth attesting to this wallet address that they're a verified account true. And so if we click on the schema, you can see that the schema itself is very simple. It's just a bool verified account. So they're just attesting true or false to an address. And the unique part about the schema is that you can actually register a resolver contract that wraps around the schema itself, and it acts like a hook. So when an attestation is being made, you can actually control who is eligible to make attestations. You can also do things after the fact as well. So let's say you make an attestation for contribution, right? Like if you're creating some impact schema, let's say you attest this person contributed, right at the point of the attestation for contribution, you could emit a payment or drop them like an NFT or something. So you can do like actions before or after and really control like the kind of the brain of what the schema is able to do. And yeah, so you simply just register a schema and then you make attestations with it. Schema registration, super simple. First thing I always do is just see if there's a schema that already exists, because if there is a resolver, you don't really want to like use resolver contracts that you don't know like who built them, because you don't know, you have to verify like what type of logic that resolver does. But there's a lot of just very generic like schemas, and if there isn't a resolver, then you can just use them. So I was actually looking before during the call just to see if there was a schema for like contribution, just being able to attest to someone as like a contribution or a contributor. And there's some in here, and I could go in to see like, okay, there's like a vault ID, a contributor amount, timestamp. There's all these like ones, but I just want something simple. I just want to say that someone's a contributor, true or false. So what I would do is you can use the Explorer to register schemas kind of in a no-code way and just say contributor. And then for the schema, the type field, I would want to probably just use bool. And you can make this like way more robust, add like new fields, right? Like contributor type, eligibilities. You can, create subscriptions for like people that have an attestation, whatever kind of control you want. There's no resolver address. I don't have a contract I want to wrap around this. And then, so I'm going to create this. So I'm going to use my phone here just for this one. Let's see if it pops up. So I just signed it, and we are registering a schema on Base. And so it just went through, and we can see that the new schema has been created. And then what we also provide is just like a very simple code sample, so you can see how to make an attestation with that schema that you just made. So pretty straightforward to make it kind of like plug and play. But let's make an attestation for this. So ideally, you want to compose attestations together, and I'll show you kind of how that can happen. But for a recipient, we can add, who's got a simple ENS name that I could just attest to for fun here?
I've got Paul2.eth.
Paul2, like this?
Exactly.
Nice. So it resolves, right? So even on base, we help kind of resolve it properly. Contributor, true. And then you can set an expiration time, right? So if you have like a subscription, you can allow it to automatically expire. And then every attestation, they get that specific attestation UID. But sometimes you want to like reference other attestations. So this was actually, this is a schema used by Optimism. So if you go into Optimism's like docs, they have a whole list of schemas that they're using for retro funding attestation. So project and organization identifiers, organizational metadata, project metadata, application statuses. And so if I just click on this one, you can see this was the retro funding application status. And if I dive into an attestation, I can see that the attestation was signed by this address, which is their address, attested to this data, but it's also referencing something. And so it's actually referencing a different attestation. So this application is referencing a project ID or a Farcaster ID. And this isn't referencing anything else. So you have a Farcaster ID and then the project metadata, but it's all kind of linked together in this like knowledge graph type system. So when you make an attestation, you can easily make references to other types of data. Now, where was I making that? I think I lost it. Oh, here it is. You can make them off-chain or on-chain, as I described before. Making off-chain attestations, you just get an object that's completely private, and it can be stored kind of wherever you want. And it's just like a JSON object. So just attest it to it, and then we'll see that the attestation gets registered. And it's just this address attested to Paul, that he's a contributor, true. And then I can revoke it. Let's just say Paul's malicious in some way, or just he's graduated from a contributor to something else. You can revoke it and reference this attestation as needed. But you can attest anything. So you can attest the data, you can attest the like statuses, you can attest the milestones, impacts. Some notable teams right now, like DVouch, use it. A lot of the Giveth teams, projects use attestations. Gitcoin's a heavy user of it. Optimism's like Foundation, Coinbase, DVouch. I think I mentioned DVouch. Related. So many like cool retro funding teams, and like what we really want is like as this attestation data gets produced, it makes it really easy to like compose and build upon it. And so really encourage, like, if you're building a public good project or even related to some public good infrastructure, if you're producing data that you want other people to rely on, then instead of stuffing it into like Supabase or like some like off-chain database, or creating your own schema and like storing it in a contract in kind of like a very unique metadata way, if you can operate it with like a very simple like structure, right? If you structure it as an attestation, it makes you have the full flexibility to determine like what fields are important to you, but you still are communicating the data in the same way, so other people can immediately know like, okay, this data from this entity is just schema XYZ, and I can use it for impact measurement or whatever is important to you.
Nice, great. Yeah, that was great, Bryce. I appreciate it. That was a very good walkthrough. Maybe for the sake of time, could you speed run through some maybe things EAS would like to see from maybe developer tooling? That would be helpful.
Sure. So right now, we're trying to like just make it super easy for people to make attestations, to go from this idea to make an attestation. But there's some other like edge cases we've been trying to solve for. So two things that we've released recently. One is if you're interested in ZK, we just launched a ZK playbook that allows you to create ZKPs from off-chain attestations. So if you get a signed attestation that's off-chain, you can generate a zero-knowledge proof from that signed data and allow others to verify it. And you could even have a verifier contract attest to the proof. So like the proof is generated, you attest to the proof, and then that way you don't have to like reproduce the ZKP every time you need to prove it to someone. You just generate the proof once, have a verifier contract attests to it, and then you just, read the verifier contracts like attestation. So that's like a really cool, simple pattern, but we walk through, like, we spend a lot of time talking to builders on challenges of how do you go from like, what is ZK to begin with? So we even have like ZK and attestation, like 101 type detail. But read that if you're interested in it. Happy to help you explore ideas around ZK attestations. And then this is kind of like a hidden tool that we built. Hidden meaning like I just wish it had more attention around it. But this was like a really cool project that we built. It's fully open source. It's for calculating transitive trust. So if you're building some sort of reputation system, especially for like impact measurement, and you want to understand like how much you should trust different people based off of like different attributes that they might have, we were really trying to think like, well, how do you actually calculate and propagate trust like in these types of decentralized systems? And the most common way is this tool called Eigentrust, or this paper called Eigentrust. Not related to EigenLayer. It was used for like BitTorrent and to calculate seeding and leaching ratios. But we were looking at it and we realized like you could actually have malicious actors like civils like work together to kind of reduce the overall score and weights for people in these like reputation type graphs. So we had a guy on the team kind of review it, and he's like, he competes in math like competitions. He loves math, way over my head on the math side, but he reviewed the Eigentrust paper and was able to come up with a better way to actually implement Eigentrust for decentralized systems, and that's what transitive trust is. So it allows you to easily calculate how much I should trust. If I trust Afo and Afo trusts Paul, then I should trust Paul a little bit, but that doesn't mean that Nick has to trust Paul at all if we're not connected in our network. So it just allows you to, and you can use any edge as you can use any sort of data as like the signal. We think you could use attestations are great, but it could be any type of data, and just allows you to quickly calculate it. So I'll drop this in the chat.
Yeah, can you drop these links? Yeah, this would be great.
But check it out, and the SDK is available for anyone to use too.
This is awesome, and I think there's a whole trust Monty. I'm not sure if anybody on the call is working on like a whole trust graph, regen trust graph. So I wonder if they're using some of this for that. But yeah, this is great. Yeah, thanks, Bryce. It's like super great presentation. On the ZK part, I have to mention, because I remember years ago, that's like I was trying to like I remember we had a call with like Bravado, or now it's Bravado, but I think Polygon ID.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So now it's great to see some of those modules built into EAS. Awesome.
Yeah, it's we're excited to see it happen. We just want to see like we're really trying to advocate for useful cases instead of just use cases for the industry. So like, how do we get teams building some cool things? And I think ZK is like underserved, and there's just a lot of cool stuff. So feel free to reach out to us. We're really helpful in any of the chats if you're building through something. Happy to help you think through schema design, implementations, anything like that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Grace.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, guys.